Friends, welcome to Precise Elements, where we discuss the advanced psychology of imagination of the latter Platonists. I cognize the enchantment factor. Through self-control, practice, ritual, and prayer, the brilliant, clear fountain of contemplation and awareness is established. Opinion is drawn from our self-knowledge and our understanding. This being the case, how might we discover ideas that approximate to the true? I only answer as this matter appeared to be to me. Friends, this has been a heavy lift. That's a long time in the making. I came across Indian philosophy, which the Vedanta, which was one of my earlier studies out of my regression work that I did with hypnosis, which brought me to those works. So what I'm trying to say is, I don't know everything. I don't even know how accurate my work is, but it is a reflection of my understanding, and it's probably wrong, and you should probably make up your own minds, do your own studies. The thing I'm trying to say is, with all these words, our intellect flourishes on challenge, difficulty. So also in our studies, subjects that we study, choose a difficult study. If you have mastered the field, then choose something that's outside of your core skills. The essence of self-discovery has something to do with the inner doorway and our imagination. The most ancient vehicle of the soul, who elevates us to love the beautiful and the true. A refrain we hear, I heard Iamblichus, for instance, say the same thing. Very beautiful notion. Imaginative power, all forming, receiving, assimilating, interconnecting medium, omnipresent, everywhere present. Who might this imagination, whose discernment is through a fountain, heart and soul, be? This is not an understanding that's created from the vast multitude of casual opinions. That there subsist preceding conditions, who, governing from imaginative fountains, principled deities, gods on high, the coming to be of the manifest world, is an opinion which is most ancient and appear to be lost. Subtle forming worlds, subtle wholenesses, unities compared to our present fragmented views, indicate to me remarkably that psychical fountains pre-exist, who makes possible all forming subtle, immaterial and material worlds. And the most intriguing of all opinions approaching to the true is the infinity of imaginative power, motion and activity, is the fountain who gives birth to and brings into being all formation, newness, and restoration to the world. And this fountain, we have, this is our symbol that depicts this fountain that we are talking about of power, motion, and activity. The hidden power, motion and activity or energy, I've seen some translations, a unity comprehending all psychical and imaginative subtle formations. Hence, in my opinion, internal, self-luminous, imaginative motion, the threefold, power, motion, and energy, who is called forth from within the depths of the Divine Mother, first, alone, and infinite power. The self-luminous, comprehending, imaginative power who holds within her mystical seat infinite power, the hidden imaginative activity and movement and intelligence of all possible participations and formations of the world. This resplendent feminine fountain, image maker, who is replete with infinite and incomprehensible power, who makes living being infinitely through her mid-seat of power, makes the formation of the boundary of the world, the sensible heaven, and all interior participating images or likenesses of the brilliance of being possible, including our self-beholding fantasy or imagination. For the Divine Mother calls forth the power of the Father. Here we have depicted it again like this. The Mother calls forth the power of the Father, forming the first subtle imaginative appearances, the divine principles interior to us, such as gods and angels, govern and precede with their wisdom the formation of the multitude of beings partaking the one. In our icon here we have the rose-colored arrows, which signifies unceasing love and is an eternal motion of oneself and unceasing love. The beautiful concept I came across in both Indian philosophy and in 600 AD, up to 600 AD. Based on what we said so far, we may see that exercising our creative, assimilative, self-perceiving, self-beholding imagination through contemplation, learning, and prayer is an exercising, a practicing of our interforming imagination. Learning itself and the physical body can be viewed as instruments of learning that prepares us for a higher state of self-awareness and free invention. Einstein, in his discovery of the general principle of relativity, referred to imagination and free invention as crucial to his discovery. We might ask then, who is the mother of invention? Does it have something to do with the imagination? A little before we said, this feminine fountain, image maker, replete with incomprehensible power. That's a view of Orpheus, who precedes, who is very close in time to Homer, is an ever-running fountain who brings forth from unfathomable powers and depths, newness and restoration from pain, grief, suffering, death, difficulty to all beings in the world. Our forming, receiving, assimilating imagination in potentia possess the capability to be moved and to be elevated, to be exercised, to be lifted up to love and our self-understanding. Inner contact, the alchemical interconnection of imagination with all unseen, living, forming harmonic world media. The source of this elevating renewal is internal, is vitally interconnected with our threefold luminosity of being. Being, power, activity. Motion, power, activity. There is no order here. It's all a unity. Thus, our own psyche, our intellect, turning inward or looking within, enters within our soul. Entering within is a decision, because we can choose to do nothing. We can just be oblivious of higher awarenesses. How do we possess this capability of looking inwardly and of inner contact? And how is this elevating undertaking in our understanding symbolized? We have prepared here some symbols. Just briefly, there's many more symbols that symbolizes subtle imaginative forms. We see here there's Zeus, Jupiter, or the demiurgus, in his fiery carriage with fiery wheels, fiery axles. There's Phaedo. I think he dares to ask Zeus if he could ride his vehicle, his carriage, his intellect, in other words. But he is woefully inadequate for this task, and Zeus comes to his rescue because he is not, shall we say, skilled enough in his intellect to drive the carriage of Zeus. Closer in time, probably, we have Jacob's ladder with the angels up and down, winged angels. And here we have Assyrian and Chaldean images, winged, with wings and feathers. There is Homer's boat, which is a classic, the boat on the stormy seas of life, a classic. And here we have the angels of Mons in the Second World War come to form a line helping soldiers fight. In Vedanta we have the subtle bodies, which we are going to come to later, which is the same idea. Many harmonic forms then, as we see, of intellect and soul, symbols describing aspects of man, the microcosm. We are not just matter, there is so much more to us than meets the eye. And the summit of our rational intellect, creative reasoning capabilities. All these are symbolizing the internal flight or imagination of our fantasy. The elevating dialectic of Parmenides may be called living waters in which the wings of the soul, being dipped, elevates her to higher awareness. We have a very great tendency to dismiss things we can't see, the mystical in our works, and really the greater part of formation of the world is mystical. The wings being dipped, the wings of the soul, being dipped in the life-giving waters of intellect, elevates her to higher awareness, for the wings are the powers of the soul leading to vitality and newness, reflective through contact and alchemy within the contemplative intellect of the brilliance of living being. But the feathers may be viewed as the natural inclination of the soul to the good, justice and truth, received and assimilated within the reasoning power of the soul, the intelligence of the soul. And here we have an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph with Ma'at, the feminine goddess of truth, justice, balance, order, and harmony, and with her winged, with her feathers symbolizing truth. Our imagination possesses two opposites, symbolized by two fiery feminine mares. The gods are the drivers of the carriage with fiery wheels and fiery axles, with wings and motion. One horse elevates, lifting up to love and the luminosity of being, the other horse downdrawing, opposing into the dark realms of hate, anger, and guilt. Hades. The unity of power, motion, and activity, intelligence or intellect or logos, drive the internal vehicle of the soul. It is the pilot, say, of an aircraft or a ship or a small boat. Our own assimilative, receptive, and self-beholding imagination, our intellect, who possess opposing forces, polarities, is brought under self-control through the exercise of our creative reasoning and our rational intellect. Imagination is the inner doorway or the entrance to internal psychological renewal and change. An ancient alchemical language. Today we hold DNA is language of material formation. An ancient alchemical language, an interior intuitive formation, an internal projection, the unfolding birth of newness of the brilliance of self. Our fantasy interforms and receives internal projections, intellectual intuitions from within the instantaneous comprehending media of a nested through hierarchy. And here we have depicted with our icon, again, as the nesting. There's nothing separate or outside of the light of being. We will come to this at a future time. So our fantasy interforms and receives internal projections, says Proclus, intellectual intuitions from within the instantaneous comprehending media of a nested through hierarchy. A hierarchy of gods whose vitality and connective subsistence is brought forth infinitely from within the comprehension of their preceding immaterial summit, who comprehends the participation of all possible psychical world formations from within its self-luminosity, the brilliance of living being. We see how psyche, the psyche, anthropos, is tightly interconnected and interforming within the most divine light of infinite imaginative power and world formation. We see that the brilliance of oneself, true existence or living being, is the self-luminous sphere who touches and governs all internal nested distributions. The self-luminous sphere of living being touches everything internal to it, a nested distribution of intelligent, subtle forms or light beings. We may see that the vitality of immaterial heaven, the world soul, all perfect vitality, without posterior images or likeness, very important. The psychical vitality, who participates oneself. The self-luminous idea is participated by the immaterial vitality of heaven and earth, and participates, and the subordinate hierarchy of intellect is connected with the world soul. The distribution of the many intellects, our rainbow indicates connection, everywhere connected, hierarchy, or the hierarchy of resonant vehicles of the supermundane phantasy. We may see immaterial heaven and earth, the monad with dominion of omnipotent multitude, the world soul, circumscribed within its self-luminous participative vitality, participating being, through connection. The whole hierarchy of gods who distribute through division and separation the participation of the illumination of being and intelligence throughout the subordinate world of the supercosmic imaginative power or whirlpool of Jupiter, Zeus, and Divine Mother Rhea. 6 kings, say they, are the fountains who through ratio or analogy makes possible the whole connective, participative hierarchy of subordinate intellect and the formation of the world. Who are the 6 kings? According to Orpheus, Pythagoras, Parmenides, and Proclus. We have taken, if I can just go back one slide, we see here the brilliance of living being, threefold living being. We have depicted in the next slide up here. So when we say up here, we put it in the very summit of the world, all immaterial. So we have luminous self, ousia, which is beyond aeon or eternity, and first alone imaginative power, which we met in the slides just before, bringing forth the first king, Phanetos. The second king is Queen Night. Third king is Heaven. Fourth comes Saturn, Jupiter, Bacchus or Dionysius, and the other Titans. We have ruling Jupiter, Neptune, Vulcan, the fabricator and generating the corporeal world, Mercury, Venus, Apollo, newness, the triad designated as newness and restoration. And in the feminine series, we have imaginative power, pure and resplendent, the first alone power, incomprehensible power. We have here king, goddess, queen, knight, nothing to do with sex. And below queen, knight, we have, I say below, but it's all internal. There's no distinction of class or station here. Below queen, knight, we have immaterial mother earth. We have ocean and tethys, which is a special designation, separative duad. A duad is not a duality. There isn't two, it's a unity, a union, and it's not a marriage either. Juno, Rhea, and Proserpine comes next, the supermundane forming whirlpool. The first self-moved, self-forming. Now, friends, today we have in our notions, I see Carl Friston, the physicist, with his Markov blanket. He says that there must have been some life in the, just after the Big Bang, because there had to be something that had the capability of self-assembly. Well, you could have knocked me over when these people didn't mention that there is a very ancient idea already of this, of Proclus. The first was the self-moving, the self-forming world, self-forming, intelligent world, assimilative, connecting, preceding of mundane essences. Then after this, we see series Queen Juno, Diana, the Vivific triad series, the mundane, forming the mundane, phantasy or whirlpool. And we have Vesta, Minerva, and Mars, the defensive and the guardian triad, a unity, not three units. We have Maya, mother of invention, ever-running, percolating fountain. Earlier on we said Einstein mentions imagination and free invention. Well, in this theology, Maya, the Divine Mother, percolating fountain, brings forth invention or newness to the world. And we have the celestial earth, corporeal earth, mother, and we have the immaterial earth, incorporeal. So to some, we have the good beyond the one. There is a bit beyond the brilliance of being, there is no separation of the feminine series or the Divine Mother in this theology. There is another theology that holds the Divine Mother to be the earth and an opposition to heaven, the sensible heaven. We won't say too much about that. Feminine infinity, omnipotent and perfect, comprehend and projects from in herself an intelligible multitude of vehicles, parts, subtle formations, participating within wholeness, which she produces infinitely. Hence, the Divine Mother bodies forth through images or vehicles, likenesses, goodness, in every dimension of the material formation of the world, or the all. Here we see Plato saying, the horses and chariots of the gods and angels are good and composed of things that are good. Taylor has a footnote in his works that says Plato symbolizes the threefold form of the soul, one being life intellect, as a winged chariot and a charioteer drawn by two horses. By the chariots, we should understand it means all the inward-looking discursive powers of the soul. But here we have Olympiodorus saying something very important about the enchanting powers. I cognize the enchantment factor, the enchanting powers of our own sense cognition, calypso, mystical calypso, sense, the sense world, who draws a veil, a kalema, who covers the sun of reason. You can't get better mystical expressions, indications of mystical things than this. Beautiful expressions. The enchanting powers of our own sense cognition draws a veil who covers the sun of reason, and are twofold. We can attend to the highest divine love and intelligence within all things, or our attention can be drawn into the depths of darkness, which possesses two fountains, pleasure and grief, along with hate, fear, loss, unexpected death, sleights of hand. Friends, here I must observe in my own work on near-death experiences and past lives. There is a vast body of literature at this moment on reincarnation and the journey of the soul through many worlds. How sleights of hand, deception, deceit, and the one selling the other short for gains. It makes an impression on the soul. And these are images that forms in our cognition. And they are, I want to say, long-range projections. When there is another opportunity to reincarnate, one must say, should say, that all these factors comes into play in this lifetime. These images of hate, fear, sleights of hand, and deceit, the wild horses of passion, formed by our external sense activity, are the inner people. The phantasms formed by our self-beholding imagination. I cognize, imaginative cognition. The veils of projection, hypnosis, or enchantment we draw across the upliftment of our own souls to love, instantly drawn in our imaginative cognition through our interactions with others. In Vedanta, there is the veiling power of projection, but we've been told by preeminent psychologists not to investigate. It's not, so we say, but I don't want to say too much about that. Our passions, and we can see these in the modern, what we have in Google's Gemini, for instance. There's others too, who exploit this enchantment of our passions with their search engine manipulations. It's called SEAM, and it's called nudges. The wonderful Michael Desmet, during very early stages of COVID, have warned about this hypnosis. Sadly, his statistic that he gives for how many in a crowd of people, how many are not affected, who are not affected by the mass hypnosis, is around 30%, and of that only a small percentage of people will say anything, and those will be cancelled too. So exploitation, advertising, subliminal, and this phenomenon called nudging, which is used to push legislation through Washington. Marvelous manipulation of our own hypnosis. Go figure. But why is Parmenides characterizing the two horses as feminine? Because our cognizing fantasy is at once forming, receiving, assimilating, and is feminine. The horses signify the intelligent, infinite power of imagination, who possess the potential to bring forth newness, restoration, and awareness to our souls in every world and in all things, or whose flowing hypnotic veils will draw us down to calamity and darkness. The horses signify the vigor or vitality of the principal distributed intellectual powers interior to us that precedes our world. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this the wonderful Owen Barfield, which I haven't really had time to study, he alludes maybe to preceding forms. I'm not entirely sure. He has a U-shaped. He has a never mind. He has a U-shaped evolution. The horses signifying the vigor or vitality of the principal distributed intellectual or intelligent powers interior to us, who also form the unity of our participating understanding, our reasoning, intellect, rationality, and who internally governs the whole of the corporeal world. And the wings are the elevating dialectic powers, which particularly belong to the charioteer. These things given, what can we say about the most obscure imaginative sense activity, motion and formation of the subtle bodies of the soul and our material bodies? Imaginative form or likeness is the preceding, participating, receiving, assimilating, interconnecting form of our souls. A unity of complex, resonant, luminous bodies, bodied forth from all the celestial spheres, who forms our cognition and perception, and who through contact brings forth instantaneous, direct and accurate image formation. Priscian of Lydia. Between external sense activity or energy and internal pre-existing psychical subtle imaginative forms or vehicles. And we have on part 5 already treated of Priscian of Lydia and how this formation occurs in our cognition. This imaginative formation, seated within the soul, receiving, collecting, assimilating, flawlessly brings forth at once the direct imaginative intuition of flowing living images. Both the activity or energy of external sense, the senses, the eye, the ear, and the preceding internal psychical imaginative forms are necessary for the forming unity of our imaginative cognition. Isaac Myer, who treats of Synesius on dreams. Dreams are an important part of this inquisitive path. In 1888, he says, imagination is similar to a mirror in which it reflects itself, so that the animal, the soul, may perceive the images which have their seats in the soul. The soul is a higher order and comprehends all subtle forming imaginations or vehicles. We may see that the internal beholding power of our imagination forming within of our own cognition, I cognize, possess through a continuum of preceding distributed hierarchy of intelligence, vital, immaterial, and material participation. The same interior luminous source, the luminosity of living being. We see how internal imaginative vehicles of the world soul, the gods, the angels, who precede, interconnect, assimilate, and convert, are participating in the formation of the totality of the corporeal world, and are the interconnecting vehicles, the sources, who unfold, precede, and govern the stable existence of true imaginative forms, preceding the external flowing, changing forms of matter and the corporeal world. We have in part 8 and 9, I think specifically in part 9, we treat of the last 4 propositions of Proclus in his wonderful Elements, 208 to 212, where he treats of the vehicle of the soul. And the conclusion that I had out of that is that subtle forms are stable and they come into habitude in the mundane fantasy. Dionysius or Bacchus with Juno, Diana, the leading Vivific triad. And we see the first alone power assimilating, receiving, collecting intelligible medium, moving living being infinitely, is unseen like the rational faculties, is within herself eternal, present, and forming the flowing likeness or images, participating and connected with living being. First, infinite imaginative power receives, assimilates, collects, and vitally participates, makes within herself the images of the vitality of participating imaginative vehicles of the gods, whose luminous vehicles are likeness, who progresses externally according to hierarchy and hyparxis or summit throughout and ratio, proportion, throughout the supercosmic and encosmic world. A detailed discussion I have of this hidden triads and supercosmic feminine image-making whirlpools can be viewed here in part 10. See, I'll put a link on it, or you can just look on my beautiful YouTube channel. To some an ancient paradigm, imaginative cognition, or ICOG, our subtle, receiving, assimilating imagination brings forth, educes. Let me just get this picture of, through contact with external sense activity and internal activity of intellect, all image formation within our cognition at once. Hence, true moving appearances forming through the sense activity and motion of imagination is a moving, flowing formation, a seamless unity within our eye cognition, imaginative cognition. Where else did we see this flowing condition of our cognition? When that wonderful James Gibson says that our observation, that the observer has flowing, moving paths and not points, that's a big statement. But isn't this undergirthed by what we just say here? Just saying. This is not a regurgitation of some other commentaries. This is, I would like to think of as something with substance, which we should be looking at. These flowing images, a forming unity within us, are not images as projected on a screen, say on the IMAX theater screen of Max Wellman's, or projected onto the universe outside of our heads, Cartesians, not separate from the environment or separate from nature and the universe, but is interforming. This is a true interformation of the totality of our participating psyche, and at once image formation. We come now to the wonderful Iamblichus and his observations on the fantasy. He says, the fantasy adheres to all the powers of the rational soul and invests all of them with figures or likeness. The fantasy fashions similitude, likeness of forms, and transmits, communicates, projects the appearances or impressions of some powers to others, exciting in opinion the illuminations from sense activity. And imaginative power, through internal assimilation and contact, brings forth into opinion the illuminations of a higher internal intellectual forms, logos. The fantasy indeed fashions, makes, is the midwife who brings forth, that's my insert, and expresses all the energy activities of the soul. He says, in his reply to Anebo, the mechanist, physicist of his time, who doubts about the capabilities of the soul, of which Iamblichus writes, he says, Iamblichus writes back to him, he says, "Nor do you rightly doubt in what you say, that is, that the soul devises great things from casual circumstances, casual opinions," at the beginning of our video. For what principles of fictions can there be in truly existing beings? Is it not the imaginative power in us who is the maker of images? And Saint Synesius, he was a priest in the early Roman Church. For he says, for the fantastic spirit. In our short introduction, we had to this video, check it out because it makes, I think it makes a point. Kepler, the fantastic spirit of Kepler, has been totally left out of the theory of the perspective theory of optics. This fantastic spirit, which Kepler calls as ultimum sentience, has been left out of these notions. We have a long history of doing this. The fantastic spirit is situated in the confines of the rational and brutal, the lower nature, is of incorporeal and a corporeal degree, and it's the common boundary of both. And the medium which conjoins divine natures, in other words, immaterial vitality, participating living being, with the lowest of all, external matter. The vehicle of the soul is the forming medium and vitality of intellect, having her fountain connected on high, and all the genera of gods, angels, demons, and heroes derive their essence from a life of this kind, for their whole essence is composed from the phantasy and from inward imaginations. The colors here and the inserts are mine. We say that our first alone infinite imaginative forming power is the principality, the mother goddess, the imaginative essence who brings forth from unfathomable depths the making of the imaginative vehicles, the subtle vehicles, of the whole ineffable hierarchy of gods and divine beings who govern and bodies forth the all. Said in a different way, we may view the alone infinity of feminine imaginative essence who brings forth the united union of a threefold ether, power, motion, energy, activity. The image maker who makes possible, brings forth, projects within herself. The living waters, resonant formation of vitality, of vital participative omnipotent multitude, the world soul, and the subordinate hierarchy of subtle vehicles of intellect, the subtle vehicles of the gods who form the world and us, the last extremity of living beings. Hence, we see the external immense luminosity of being without beginning or end affords the intelligent participation and creativity of all life and the whole world within its sphere of light. The union, therefore, of the most recent, of the most secret, unproceeding and first imaginative intelligent vehicles immediately after the one, our masculine and feminine deities bound in infinity. On this point, I just need to observe that there has been through thousands of years different descriptions of the same principles. So we have bound in infinity in Plato. We have masculine and feminine in Proclus. We have Thanatos and night in Orpheus. And we have ether and chaos in most ancient Hermetic theology. So we see, bound in infinity is the royal fountain, the highest fountain, who affords the making or illumination of every subtle imaginative form or likeness participating of the ineffable light of being. Nested within the embrace of the brilliance of true existence or living being. Imaginatio vera, true imagination, the unseen language of all image making, is the true depth and living wellspring of renewal and our interforming, receiving imagination. No matter what passionate view we each hold about ourselves and of the world, the internal imaginative port and its internal alchemy, which is particular to each person, is the common and most ancient imaginative light connection amongst all beings and the whole of the world. On imaginative power, interformation, and image making, we might say through this inner port of the vehicle of our souls, the inner bridge to higher awareness, our own receiving, assimilating imaginatio vera becomes, through participation, the maker of newness and rejuvenation in ourselves and of a new world consciousness, in conjunction with the subtle forms and of higher divinity. This is an interformation. With our souls, our imagination has the capability of interforming with a higher intelligences. Not something we hear every day. The revitalization of our world come, say ancient wisdom, upon our calling as an interconnected and interforming race of beings. Not a species, a race of beings. Born out of the cries of difficulty, pain, and despair, and where evil is prolific and oblivious, and where things have gone remarkably wrong. The doorway is an introduction to the inner alchemy of the phantasy of Plotinus. Love and light, blessings to all your loved ones. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and follow us on X. Leave a comment.